Alright, so today we are doing my December wrap-up, and I know December wrap-ups are kind of controversial because you've got your end-of-year wrap-up and what's the point, but the last time I didn't do a wrap-up I regretted it, so I'm going to do one today, and we're just going to rock with it. I read a total of 9 books in December. 2 of those were audiobooks, 2 of them were ebooks, and the remaining 5 were physical books. I did end up with a lot of new books in December, and I put a whole haul in the last reading vlog I did, which was for The Hero of Ages, but since that's a spoiler-filled vlog, here is my haul from December. Most of these were Christmas presents. Some of them were ones that I purchased myself, but these are the books that I got in December. Jumping right into the books that I read this year. The first one was Dune, and this ended up being one of my favorite books of the year. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed my time. Dune follows Paul and his mom and his dad and his family as they travel from their home planet of Caladan to their new home planet of Arrakis. They're moving to Arrakis to kind of restabilize the planet, and it's unfortunately not a great move for them because the previous family that owned or lived and ruled in Arrakis wants them gone. So the story of Dune is basically the story of this family and their attempts to survive on this planet, and the way that the culture of the planet kind of affects them. There's a lot of themes going on. It's a very intense story, and it has a lot of different parts to it. My general feelings for the story overall was definitely feelings of excitement and confusion. It was also a very epic story, so you just get sucked into this grand world and you feel like you're a part of the action as you go along. I did give this book 4 stars because I think it was well above average for the genre, and I do think it's something that most people will enjoy if they give it a chance. I don't think it's something that everyone should read in their lifetime, so that is why I did not give it 5 stars. The next book I read in December was Frostbite, which is book 2 in the Vampire Academy series. I'm doing this as part of the Vampire Academy read-along with Jess from Verity Books and a lot of other people, and I am not hosting or anything, I'm just participating. Anyways, I really enjoyed book 2 of Vampire Academy. Vampire Academy follows teenage vampires as they go to school. And in this book, they're actually a lot better than I expected them to be. But in this book, a group of evil vampires has started kind of gathering together to murder the good vampires. And this is shocking because the bad vampires are more animalistic in this kind of mythology, and they don't really have the ability to kind of organize and group together. Because if they did, they'd, rule the world. And in this book, why am I struggling so hard with getting my thoughts across? Essentially, all of the vampires in North America, or at least North America, like the northern part of North America, gathered together at a ski lodge to stay safe together. And I actually really enjoyed this story a lot more than the first one. I think the interpersonal relationships were very dynamic. I really appreciated the way that our main characters kind of thought life developed, and she's maturing is what's happening, and we're getting to watch her mature, and I really appreciated that. There was a lot less of the best friend dynamic in this book as there was in the first one, but a lot more conversations on kind of relationships and attraction and what that means and how as a teenager you should handle that, and I thought it was really well done and really fun. And this was the first book I had cried in a really long time, and I cried my eyes out. So I did give this book 3 stars still. I don't necessarily know if it's above average for the genre yet. I haven't decided. Maybe the whole series will be, but as of right now, it's just an average YA fantasy vampire book. Enjoyable, a fun time. I didn't have any particular feelings come up while I was reading it, but it was a good time. The next book I read in December was Acceptance, which is book 3 of the Southern Reach trilogy, and I do have a whole trilogy review up on the channel if you're interested in my thoughts on the trilogy as a whole. I do have to say that book 3 was my least favorite of the series, and it is because the writing style changes a lot. In the first 2 books were in the heads of one person, and they're very thought-based narratives, and they're mostly just following the thought life of our main characters. But book 3 is trying to wrap up the plot and answer a lot of questions that we were given in books 1 and 2, and so it takes a third-person perspective most of the time. There's actually a second-person perspective and a first-person perspective, but we're following different characters. We're flashing back in time, flashing back in time. We're following characters in the now, and it was difficult to invest in because we were constantly jumping from different people's minds. There were some characters that I didn't feel that it was necessary to be in their heads, even though we were getting plot information from them. I didn't enjoy being in their minds and learning about their lives. But overall, I think it was a pretty good end to the trilogy. Not necessarily what I was expecting or looking for going into it, but I did get a lot of my questions answered, and I am okay with where it went. I'm still not sure I understood everything. It's definitely a trilogy I can't wait to reread, but I ended up giving this book 4 stars as well. So, and the trilogy overall got 4 stars, I think. Because I only had one book that got 5 stars originally. It's a convoluted mess. Go watch that video if you're interested. Alright, the next book I read in December was The Letter by Richard Paul Evans, and this was one of my worst books of the year that I read. I mentioned it on my end of the year wrap up, and I have a worst books of 2020 video coming up at some point as well. Maybe it's already out. I don't know what my upload schedule is, but by the time I'm recording this, it is not out yet. But this book, I did not enjoy it at all. The Letter follows a husband and wife as they're divorcing, essentially, or separating. They had a daughter who died when she was very, very young, and they were unable to reconnect after that trauma that happened. They both kind of isolated themselves, and eventually the wife just kind of said, you have shut yourself off from me too much, and I can't live like this anymore, and so she bounces. It had potential to be a very interesting story about marriage and all sorts of things, commitment and what the purpose of a marriage is and how long you should stick it out, those kinds of conversations. But instead, we kind of ended up following our husband the majority of the time as he deals with his abandonment issues because his mother also left him when he was young. So I wasn't necessarily interested in that story. I thought I was going to get something different, and then when I found out what it was, I was kind of bummed. But beyond that, there were the story set in the Great Depression, and so there was a lot of conversations about race in the Great Depression, and I felt like it was handled very poorly. We have one character who is a person of color in the story, and it is kind of a caricature of an old man. His relationship to our main characters was kind of one, it was just very uncomfortable. I didn't appreciate what was being said. They were kind of treating him as a charity case, but they claimed him as a friend, but I don't necessarily know if they were friends because this character ends up dying. Spoiler alert, you're probably never going to read this book, and they knew nothing about his life. So I didn't think that was handled very well, and beyond that, people in general are losing their jobs. Companies are trying to figure out how to maintain payroll for everyone and what they should do, and in general, the general feeling of the country at the time was, we'll just fire the black people. And our main character refused to do that. And instead of this being just like a general, well, duh, you shouldn't do that moment, the author kind of made our main character into some sort of white savior, and it was really uncomfortable, and I did not enjoy it at all. So I gave this book 2 stars. I'm not angry that I read it, but I definitely think it's not something that anyone else should pick up. So 2 stars, and we'll move on. The next book I read was In a Holidaze by Christina Lauren, and I have a reading vlog over that on the channel. I was really, really interested in reading this book because it was Christmas time and I hadn't read a romance in forever, and I'd heard that it was really good and that I felt like what I'd heard about it would fit my taste in romance really well. And then I went to go buy it at the store, and my card got declined just as like personal information. We're kind of on the edge of brokenness. It's COVID, it's fine. But I was really bummed about it, so I tweeted about it, and then Christina Lauren sent me a free ebook copy. So I was so excited, and that kind of actually amplified my reading experience, and I enjoyed the book way more than I probably would have under normal circumstances, but I still really enjoyed it. I think it was a really cute, fun holiday romance centered around family and found family, and it really kind of hit me a lot because I related to the situation of having family friends that you spend a lot of time with, but then how that kind of struggle appears as you grow apart and what your relationship is to those families once you become an adult. I think that's a very interesting conversation to have. In this holiday romance, there's a time loop situation where our main character asks the universe to show her what will make her happy, and in this story it is a man. That's a separate topic, but a lot of the criticism that this book received was that there wasn't enough time spent in the time loop, like it was kind of like an afterthought. I didn't really care either way. I thought it was a little bit convenient, but I understood. I think it added some interesting aspects to the story itself, but not a lot. In general, the main focus was just on the romance between our hero and heroine. I did actually end up giving it 4 stars. That may have been premature. I feel like I should probably bump that down to a 3-star because I don't necessarily think it was above average for the genre. I think my experience was above average for the genre, but I don't necessarily do my ratings based off of experience. I need to do a video to talk about how I rate books, but I should probably bump that down to a 3-star, but I'm going to leave it at a 4-star because I just really enjoyed it. The next book I read was Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. This was one of the books that I picked up in December. I have mixed feelings about YA in general. One day, again, I will do a video discussing this, but Shadow and Bone really kind of exemplifies everything that I have issues with in YA. I gave this book 3 stars because I felt like it was just very, very average. The rest of the trilogy I felt a lot better about, but particularly with this book, I felt like the plot was very predictable and the internal character conflicts were non-existent, or they were just very not complex. I don't know how else to say that, but for me personally, I'm a character and a plot-based reader, and so I want my plot to be interesting, but I also want my characters to be interesting and to feel full-fledged. And I feel like with why am I getting into this? This is for a whole other video. Stop. Okay, the book. We are in the Grishaverse, which is a world made up by Leigh Bardugo in which there are magic people called the Grisha. And the magic of these people is kind of elemental. You've got people that can control wind and water, and then people that can like control the body and like squeeze your heart and kill you, whatever. Our main character is a standard YA protagonist who is chosen and special, and she has a unique ability. Supposedly this ability will allow her to save the world. And so this story follows her as she kind of comes into her powers and as she kind of gets to know the separate side of the world. So far, she's just been a normal girl, a soldier kind of, but she is learning about her world and how it is affected by these Grisha powers that people have. I enjoyed it. This was a one sitting, like I stayed up all night to finish it kind of read. YA tends to be that way for me. They just write it that way where it's so difficult to put down. But like I said, I had issues with the plots and the character development. Not the character development, but the character conflict. I don't know how to get into this without going into like my full spiel, but it was very basic. She is dealing with a lot, and her main concerns are snotty girls in class and her crush not texting her back, essentially. It's a bit deeper than that, but that's really what it was. And I know that a lot of authors try to write that way because they feel like teenagers will relate to those things, but I also think teenagers will relate to a bit more complexity when it comes to, you know, a fantasy world with fantasy things happening. I'm going to move on because I'm going to do a series review because I finished the other 2 books in January, and we'll talk about it later. The next book on the list was Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, which is book 4 in the Harry Potter series. This was my first audiobook of the month and my favorite Harry Potter book so far. I am listening through this series with my husband. He's never read them before, so we're listening to them on audiobook, and so far I preferred the movie over all of the audiobooks. Book 4 is the first time that I've changed my mind on that. So book 4 follows Harry, and there's a tournament, and Harry gets put into the tournament even though he's too young, and he has to kind of navigate, trying to figure out the clues for the tournament and relationship issues at the same time. Him and his best friend, Ron, get into like a kind of tiff, and so just kind of, it was really enjoyable. I, in general, have developed a lot of issues with J.K. Rowling's works, particularly Harry Potter, because I feel like she actually writes a lot of toxic relationships, not just between, like, Harry and his family, like his aunt and uncle, but between Ron, Hermione, and Harry. Their relationship is really toxic and uncomfortable, and it's very prevalent in this story. I guess I just kind of ignored it for all of the other stuff that was going on, the extra backstory we're getting, and all of the details that goes into the Triwizard Tournament. There was just a lot here that I enjoyed, but that toxic relationship between the 3 of them got really, really strong. At one point, he wasn't talking to Ron, and then at another point, Ron and Hermione weren't talking, and they treat each other terribly. So I have issues But I gave this book 3 stars. It's Harry Potter. It's average. I don't think Harry Potter is as above average as everyone else does, but that's okay. We move on. The next book I read was The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams, and this book was my second audiobook for the month. I have very mixed feelings about this. I have watched the movie before, and I did not understand it, and I felt that if I read the book, I would understand it better. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, if you have not heard of it before, follows a man who gets rescued by a friend of his who ends up being an alien right before Earth gets blown up. And so it's the adventures of this man and his alien best friend as they travel the galaxy. They hitchhike on a ship, a spaceship. They get picked up. They're floating around. It's a long story. But they go to discover like the secrets of the universe, or they travel to a planet that had disappeared that was supposed to be finding the secrets of the universe. Anyways, the main character, I don't remember anyone's names. The main character learns a lot about Earth and like the purpose of Earth when it was created and his role as an Earth being. It's just a very strange story. I don't know if it's absurdism, but it's what I feel like absurdism is. I gave it 3 stars. I didn't necessarily enjoy my time, but it was a very short audiobook. I listened to it in a day. I'm glad I listened to it, as now I kind of know the history behind it. I do not think I will continue on with the series. That's all I really have to say. And the last book I read in December, and the last book I read of 2020 was The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson, and I have a vlog for this. Go watch it. Unfortunately, I gave this book 3 stars as well. All of the books in this series were 3-star reads for me. Brandon Sanderson is not my guy, and this was especially not my book. This was my least favorite of the trilogy. It is a 723 something like that page book, and I was bored until page 500. And I have realized that the reason why I was bored is because I am not emotionally invested in hardly any of the characters. I am interested in Finn, our main character. I hate her husband. Oh, spoiler. I hate her love interest. I just genuinely dislike him, and the majority of this book is inside his head. Essentially, this is a siege story at the same time the end of the world. It's, I don't know how to talk about these things without spoilers, so if you don't want to know anything about Hero of Ages, just skip, because I don't know how to talk about it, but I didn't enjoy it. There we go. I enjoyed it as so far as, like, I have now read a Brandon Sanderson series, and I enjoy the worlds that he creates and the magic that he uses and the overarching conversations of life and death and good and evil and how they work together. I enjoy those conversations, but I'm not interested in his characters hardly. I'm not interested in the story, like the nitty-gritty story, the overarching world plan I enjoy, but the day-to-day story and the lives of these characters, I'm not interested. And I don't know why. There could be a lot of reasons for it. I had favorite characters. I fell in love with a couple of characters, but in general, I just wasn't interested in what was happening. And that goes for like the majority of the series itself, not just this book. So kind of a letdown. Honestly, I thought December was going to be a fantastic reading month, and it was average. I would say I had a couple of 4 stars, mostly 3 stars, 1 2-star. But I was hoping that Hero of Ages would knock it out of the park. I was hoping that Acceptance would knock it out of the park, and they were just fine. There you have it. Those are the 9 books I read in December. I hope this wasn't too rambly. I feel like I haven't recorded in weeks, because I haven't recorded in weeks, so we're just gonna move on from that. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know if you've read any of these books, if you agree with my thoughts, if you disagree, whatever. This has been my December wrap up, and I will see you in the next video.